Really most effectively attracted me in the golf sense was the fact that Lawson Little played on the golf team. And you know, he was a very, very effective, colorful character in his prime. And I think that was a very significant attraction. I'll jump ahead because picking him up, I obviously was very much involved with watching his career with a great deal of interest, and he wins the 1940 Open, and it began to deteriorate in his game. And in 1948, I was at Oxford, and I thought to myself, I'd like to try to play in the British Open. I was then at the point where that was not an unrealistic, I never would have come close to winning it, but it was not unrealistic to think that I might be able to qualify to play in it. And in those days, they had a fairly open qualifying. They had a handicap thing, but so the British Open was at Muirfield, and I went up to Muirfield and tried to qualify, and I came close, but didn't make it. But Lawson was there. I hadn't seen him. I had some exposure to him over the years. And I hadn't seen him for a very long time, and he was there, and he announced that he had come because he'd won the Canadian Amateur and the Canadian Open, the U.S. Amateur, the U.S. Open, the British Amateur, and he'd not won the British Open, and he wanted to complete that sixth. And he typically would hold court, and he was engaging and interesting, but he was drinking. And it was remarkable. I remember clearly that he shot 73-73, and now he's now got to play on Saturday in those days, 36 holes. And I'm sitting around talking with him, and he's drinking really remarkably heavily. And I thought to myself, he's gone. He's taken this trip for this purpose, and he can't possibly realize what the objective is, and it was a shame. It's also, I think, briefly worth mentioning that I had another exposure to him. In the Navy, when I got a commission as an ensign, they sent us to indoctrination school at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And there were 1,000 of us in 500 double bunks as roommates in this gymnasium. And Lawson Little was there. He was, so we crossed paths again. And of course, at that time, he was not too far from his prime. And oddly enough, a match was arranged for the benefit of the Red Cross. And I was paired with Lawson Little. And we were playing Bob Goldwater, Barry's brother, and Leo Deagle on a public golf course in Tucson. Well, I've got to tell you, when that developed, I thought I died and gone to heaven. I'm going to be Lawson Little's partner. People are going to pay money, and it's going to go to the Red Cross, you know. So it certainly was a seriously defining moment in our relationship. And I had that experience as well with him.
What kind of player was he? Obviously, he was world class, considered the finest match player in the world for a period, as I understand it. Hooked the ball, but what would you say about his game?
Well, he hit the ball a long way. I would say the most effective aspect of his ability was that, boy, he was competitive. And as is true of any really accomplished golfer, the competition brought out the best in him. And he demonstrated that a lot. You know, there was that British Amateur where he was playing at Prestwick in the final, and he won 14 and 12, and he started out the afternoon round with 6 straight threes. I mean, that's just mystical.
Back in those days, wow.
That's just absolutely mystical. So that basic characteristic, I think, had a lot to do. But the lore was, you know, that he wasn't #1 on the Stanford golf team. I don't know whether it was true or not, but there was a guy here by the name of Art Doering, and Doering was able to beat him here. But tee it up with Lawson teed it up, and it really mattered. It was something else to witness.
Wasn't Little the carrier of huge numbers of clubs in his bag? Didn't Lawson Little carry a vast number of clubs?
They all did.
And
they all did.
They all did. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't unusual to have to find some guy with 23 clubs in his bag. Yeah, yeah. So he wasn't unusual in that sense. It was amazing how that developed.
But all of that eventually led the USGA and the RNA to limit the number of clubs to 14, some more reasonable.
You bet. No, it got, you know, it got out of hand. First place took a long time to select the club. And it was ridiculous. But
you mentioned Art Doering. Did you have any interaction with Art Doering? He's also a member of the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I've been able to get a little bit of information about him, but not a lot.
I did not. I was simply aware of him on two counts. One of the most important is he was said to be head of Lawson Little as a golf team here, and said to beat Little fairly regularly on this golf course. And then his subsequent to his Stanford career, for a while, he was fairly prominent. He could really play, obviously. So
Who was the golf coach when you came?
Eddie Twiggs.
Eddie Twiggs.
And boy, what a break that was for all of us to have Eddie Twiggs. He was one of the more interesting personalities that I've ever met. He was an amateur. He was a member of the Olympic Club. And the lore was, he obviously had a lot of money. And the lore was that he'd made a fortune in Coca-Cola stock. And he lived in a lifestyle that would indicate that he certainly had a significant amount of money. And as I understand it, he, after all, the golf had just begun to develop here. And he found out that there was an opening for a golf coach. I'm not clear on whether he was the first golf coach or not, but if he wasn't, he was certainly the second. He got Al Masters was then the director of athletics, and Eddie heard that there was an opening, and Eddie came and had never had any experience other than playing amateur golf, but he loved the game and thought, boy, that would be a wonderful way to spend some time. And he lied to Al about his age. He was much older than he admitted to being, but he certainly was functional, and he got the job. Boy, he was influential in terms of how he affected those of us who had lucky enough to be exposed to him. He was a total consummate lover of the game. He was a very strong taskmaster with regard to the conduct of his players. He was fastidious in his dress, and he insisted that his players be thoroughly well groomed. And then occasionally he'd have a player that didn't have enough money to be well groomed, and Eddie would groom him. He was a extraordinarily effective purveyor of qualities and characteristics that you needed to be able to be an effective golfer, into transcending how you had to swing the golf club. And so the golf teams responded to him, and we were, if I may say so, we were very, very good. He had one attraction that's worth mentioning, and that is that Eddie was a bachelor, and he was in his 70s. In those days, being in your 70s was well up there, but he had plenty of energy and no problem. Eddie had a girlfriend, and Thursdays was Eddie's day with his girlfriend. And you gotta understand how, in the golf team, how it intrigued us that, Eddie wasn't, and we all knew, we understood, and then when we'd go away on a trip somewhere, we never got out of the state except for the national championships, every Thursday, Eddie got a long telegram. So there was an element of romance there that added something to our feelings about Eddie.
There was Howard Hughes and Katie Hepburn, and there was Eddie Twiggs.
That's right. It picked up again.